Have you ever been hacked? Let's talk about store security. So first of all, what it is that you see when you try to picture a hacker? Is it the shady guy with the glasses and the hoodie? Is it just a normal guy who is typing in the office? It's actually none of the two, or a bit of the two maybe. These are usually guys who don't do the job themselves. They actually create scripts. They actually go into your systems, go into your websites, and they try to attack you and they try to attack thousands of others. This is something called the spray and pray attack, where they have a script, the script attacks thousands or millions of computers, and it tries to get in each one. Out of these thousands, one of them works, they get in, that's fine, it works for them. Now, this spray and pray attack is actually much more common, and the most common scenario is something called a brute force attack, where they would first of all try to find your store domain name. And that's quite easy, because if they are searching for different stores, they might be able to find your domain name. And then they take your domain name and they try different addresses after that. So they try domain/administrator, domain/admin, domain/backend. Once they receive a message that something is there, that they can try to log in on that page, they will actually try to do it. And they will try to do it with a combination of different things. So first of all, they will try a brute force attack. Now, this is not them doing it manually, this is not them trying to type in thousands of different password combinations, but this is a system that is doing them for them. It tries thousands or millions of different usernames and passwords and see if it matches. It's actually a little bit more advanced than you might think, because it doesn't necessarily try things like, ABCD, ABCE, ABCF, which would be the typical example, but it actually also tries common words, and it actually also tries things like common passwords. So it's actually able to break your password quite fast, faster than you might expect. So I've mentioned that they can try to penetrate your administrator panel. They can also do something like this. If a vulnerability is found in one of your systems, let's say you are using an open source systems which thousands of different websites use, and they hear of this vulnerability, then they'll start using it and they'll try getting through this backdoor in every system that they know has the same platform. So this is the reason why you need to keep your store super secure. And I don't know if you saw my previous videos, but one of them was the different types of e-commerce platforms. And as you saw there, some platforms actually have automated updates, some of them you need to do it manually. The fact that you need to do it and the responsibility to do it is on your end. You are the store owner, you need to make sure that this data is safe. So now let's talk about the first encounter I've had with hacking. This was a long while ago, a couple of years ago, and the company I was working at they had servers, and these were test servers where we kept some of the backup versions of the stores. Now, it turns out that somebody got access to those servers and they encrypted all the files there. So one day we're trying to get in, we're trying to get to this servers, and it seems that every file we see is encrypted, we cannot see what's inside. And we see a giant message that says, if you want your files back, you need to pay us some money in Bitcoin, and you will be able to get a decryption protocol or decryption script that will allow you to get your files back. This is a fairly typical hacking practice. It's called ransomware. The good news is that these were only test servers. We actually had this data somewhere else. We didn't need it that much, so we didn't end up paying. This was not a huge fee, but the problem with ransomware attacks is that you don't really know if they will actually decrypt it, and you also don't know when they will attack you next. There's actually a great podcast called Hackable, which I highly recommend you listen to. There they explore how the hacking community actually tries to get in different systems. And in terms of ransomware, it's actually quite interesting, because some of these ransomwares, besides the fact that they tell you, how much money you need to pay in Bitcoin and actually how to do it, because most people don't actually know how Bitcoin works, so you need an instruction. Some of these ransomware attacks, they actually also show you reviews and social proof that they did decrypt the files after the ransom was paid. You can assume that if they know that you are vulnerable to this, if they know that you've you did pay, so it means that you have some files that are worth something to you. It may not happen the next week, it may not happen the next month, but you can assume that at some point they will come back to you and ask for more money. They will just do the encryption again, and maybe, yes, maybe you fixed it by then, maybe you have better security by then, but I'm assuming that out of the 1,000 people that they do it to, 10 to 100 will probably not change anything apart from their passwords, which is actually quite easy to hack, as you will see in the next fragment. So, how fast can you crack a password? There's a very interesting website called howsafeismypassword.net, and I would highly recommend you go there and you try out your password or something similar to your password. You might be surprised. Let's try, for example, something simple. Let's try password as our password. As you see, the whole screen goes red and it's immediate. You don't need to wait any time to guess this password. And you can also see that it's one of the top 5 most commonly used passwords. I wouldn't recommend that at all. Let's try something a little bit more complex. Let's try the name of a band that I actually like very much, called Gojira. This might be a little bit more complex because it actually has a capital letter, and also it's not spelled the way you would expect it to be spelled. So it's not Godzilla, but it's Gojira, so with a J. So it's not a common word, but you can still see that it takes less than a second to guess this password. It's not secure at all. We can also try something more complex. Let's type in, "You need to keep your password more secure." That actually takes quite a long time to break, and that might be a secure password for you. It's also quite easy to remember. So, is it only about making it longer? Actually, no. Making it longer is one way to go about it. Another way to make it more complex is to either add capital letters in random places or special characters. A good practice is actually thinking of a phrase that you like and trying to use the first letters of this phrase. That way you will always remember the password. It will seem very random to a stand-byer, but it will actually be something that you can remember and quite easily type in. This is extremely important because even if you have not been hacked, some of the websites where your password is stored might have been hacked. And if this happens, some of these websites will actually not protect your password well enough. It will not be encrypted well enough, so it will be secure. And now what happens is that the hacking community will have your username and they will have your password, and they actually share this between themselves. You can actually buy such lists on the black market, but also if they share it, they can also try to use it on different platforms. So for example, if they have your username and password or your email and your password, they can try it on LinkedIn, they can try it on Facebook, they can try your bank account, they can try it, I don't know, Adobe, anywhere which they see fit. And if they get access to anywhere of these places, they can actually make your life very difficult. So make sure that you use a different password for different platforms. If you are interested, there's a website called haveibeenpawned.com, and this website, you type in your email address and it will actually tell you has your email address been involved in any hacking activity. It actually tells you, for example, that your email address was in a database that was breached in 2015 from a website such as Adobe. If you see that, that's a very good reason to change your password and maybe make the security of your website a little bit better. The second time they tried to hack me was quite recently. I received this email. Please take a look. It seems quite innocent, it seems very natural, and actually it comes from a source I know rather well. It's Office 365, which I use in my office. So I didn't see anything weird with it at the beginning. But then I started noticing little small details in the email which didn't make sense to me, especially the fact that I don't know that I've turned on anything such as a voicemail. I don't know how a voicemail would actually work in an email, so it kind of stood out to me. So what I did is actually copy this attachment and I added it to a website which allowed me to check it for phishing and viruses. And it turns out that it actually was a phishing scam. Now, what is a phishing scam? A phishing scam is a practice where you say that you are somebody you are not and you're trying to get some information from a person. A very typical case is an email that you would receive from a bank, And this bank would say that here is some information that you might need in the PDF file. You download the PDF, you open it, it installs some software on your computer, which then is able to get some information from your computer, such as passwords, such as the websites you've been visiting, and so on and so forth. So that's a very common example. In this case, the file was the voicemail, and it actually makes quite a lot of sense, because if you see a voicemail and you actually use this, or you might not understand it, that it's a hacking practice, you would actually click it to see who was trying to call you and basically what message they left you. The problem is that once this program is installed, you don't know it's there. If you have an antivirus, it's good. That will probably give you some red alarm that some new software has been installed on your computer, so it should work. But also, it's very important to actively prevent situations. And in order to do so, you need to train your mind. You need to be able to see which email might be a phishing scam, which one is not. And there is a great website that will teach you that. It's called phishingbox.com. You go there and they give you examples of emails. You need to guess whether it's a phishing attack or not. And what you need to be looking out for is basically weird email addresses, it's different elements which don't seem right, it's an old logo from a company, things like that. If you do this a couple of times, you should be able to get a glimpse of it, and you should be able to identify at least some of the threats that are waiting for you in terms of your inbox. Now, even if you have the best password security software, even if you use different passwords, even if your passwords are secure, it's not going to be enough, unfortunately. So you need to actively work on two things. First of all is minimizing the risk, and second of all, minimizing the impact that a potential hack would have. One way of minimizing the risk would be to add a multi-factor authentication in your admin panel. That means that whenever you go to the admin panel, you need to log in, you will have a second way of identifying yourself. It will either send you a text message, it will either send you a link, you will get a push notification that you need to click on. So basically, you will be confirming that it is you. And this actually can work quite well. I've seen platforms where you need to scan a special QR code to get in. I've seen platforms which allow your smartwatch to access it for you, and they allow you to access if your smartwatch is close to you or the computer which you are using. It still works in the same principle. You have a two-factor authentication, which means that there are two things which identify you as a user before you can actually get in. Of course, you need to make sure that your administration panel is not under a link that everybody could guess. If you have a WordPress site, for example, don't keep it under WP login or WP admin. If you have a Magento website, don't leave it under admin, don't leave it under administrator, don't leave it under backend panel, don't leave it under panel. Use some sort of randomized letters, or at least use something different than what most people would expect. Make sure that you track who is trying to access your administration panel, and make sure that you also track what these people are doing. I've had a couple of times in my career where stores which I was working with were under attack from Russian or Ukrainian hackers, and these were typical brute force attacks. That means that a lot of bots were trying to get in by trying different usernames and passwords. The reason why they were not successful is that we had systems in place which notified us that somebody was trying to get in multiple times, and we were able to react in time. Now, by reacting in time, it means that we were able to filter out the traffic, but of course, if you also have the multi-factor authentication or you have a reCAPTCHA on your administration panel login, that also will do the trick. Finally, let's talk about the impact. So, if somebody gets to hack your store, they get the information about the users, they get the information about their email addresses, they might get the information about their passwords. This is typically, encrypted, so it's not such a huge deal, but they get access to the information about where they live, and they get information about what they ordered. It's not a place you want to be in. Especially in the European Union, you do need to make sure that you follow certain procedures. One of these procedures is to minimize the data that you have on the servers. This is actually a very good practice. You don't need that much personal information. You don't need their fax number. You don't need their middle name, you don't need a secondary address, you don't need a secondary phone, you don't need things like preferences, or you don't need their gender. These are all things you can live without, and in most cases you will not use them for your marketing activities. So if you don't need them, minimize the data which you have. This means save as little data as possible, and also make sure that you clean out the data once every while. So for example, if you have orders and you don't need them after 3 months or after 3 years, that's up to you. Just delete them. Make sure that you have some system that will actually delete them so that they are not required in the system. Of course, if somebody signs up, they've consented to it. They've agreed to store their information on your website. You need to make sure that it's secure. Make sure to prevent it. Make sure that you stop it before it can actually happen. That's the best advice I can give you. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for commenting. I would love to know what you think of these videos, what I need to change, what works, what doesn't work. Anything that you want to share with me, I'll be happy to respond to. I'll be happy to read, and you will give me more fuel to work on the next videos. So thank you very much. Thank you in advance for subscribing, and see you next time.